So do you guys like it? Although I will say that when we were waiting off into the side there, the first thing I said to him was that he can go to hell for that shot of the brontosaurus on the beach. But you had a reason for it, you said. You had a reason for like really pulling the emotion in that scene.
Well, I mean, it's the end of a dream. We saw a dinosaur for the first time 25 years ago, and it's the same dinosaur when we're leaving the island. We are blowing up the island. And that had to be a very emotional scene. Also, it needs to be very emotional. It creates an impact on Claire that should resonate in the last scene when she needs to decide again if she saves the dinosaurs or not.
Yeah, there's going to be lots of crying. Lots of crying. I was crying. So you're very much like Steven Spielberg. You're a very visual storyteller. I saw it in The Orphanage. There's one of my favorite shots is when Nina gets hit by the bus, and there's all this like slow visual storytelling before the big reveal of her with her messed up face. Sorry, spoilers if you haven't seen The Orphanage. So can you talk a little bit about using that visual storytelling to actually make it feel like Jurassic Park? Like I noticed there was a little bit of mirroring, like there's the dinosaur, I think it was the Allosaurus leaning in the eyeball, the close up of the eyeball. There's even at the end with the instead of pelicans, flying off into the sunset, it was pterodactyls. So can you talk a little bit about actually making this feel like a Jurassic film?
Well, when I work in a story, the first thing that I do is a storyboard, because for me it's like a way of rewriting the script. And for me, if there's something that I don't know how to draw, normally means that there is a problem with the script. So as the writer is working in the script, I normally draw the whole movie. And it's like, again, it's like a way of rewriting the story. And in this, making a Jurassic movie, if you think about Steven Spielberg, he's a master in creating iconic shots, and at the same time, they're very meaningful. They somehow reflect what the story is about. And it's very interesting, that shot that you're mentioning at the end, because of course when you do a Jurassic movie, there is a strong emotional connection with the other movies, because we all saw the other movies when we were very young or when we were kids. So there's this immediate impact that you have when you reference the other films, but you need to somehow reference the older movies, but into the Fallen Kingdom story. So it's not just about nostalgia. And I thought about that. I thought about how somehow in this film the center of the story was replaced by man. There's a moment that the story is not about dinosaurs anymore. It's about us. So I had this idea of having this shot of the mirror in the car, Jurassic Park car, reflecting, instead of a T-Rex, reflecting Owen, like a way of telling the audience in advance, this is going to be about us. The same at the end, it's the same ending that we have in Jurassic Park, with Alan Grant and with Sam Neill and Laura Dern looking through the window in the helicopter, but there's no birds anymore, it's dinosaurs. There's another moment that I thought was kind of like a fun reference, when they are inside the diorama, and the dinosaur is outside the diorama looking at them. So you play with this idea of creating iconic shots, but at the same time meaningful for the story we're telling in Fallen Kingdom.
Well, and you also did something too, which is the first Jurassic Park is a great balance of awe, spectacle, and horror. The T-Rex attack in the first one is a straight up horror sequence. So you're kind of the perfect person to come in and do this, I think. And I love how the second half of the movie gives you an excuse to kind of turn it scarier. Like my nephew Max was clinging onto my arm for almost the entire second half of this.
Did you like it?
Yeah.
Good.
Okay, good. It's like to be scared. People forget.
Were you too scared?
So can you talk maybe a little bit about that aspect, and was that exciting for you when you came on board and you read the script and you knew that you had a chance to kind of take it Jurassic back to one of the cornerstones of the first film?
I think when I think about the first Jurassic Park, of course you think about the visual effects and the shock of seeing CGI for the first time. That was a game changer. But apart from that, what I remember of that film was the suspense. There's this kind of Hitchcockian suspense that Steven Spielberg does in Jurassic Park, War of the Worlds. You know, I love that, and I love Alfred Hitchcock. So for me, doing a Jurassic movie was a chance of trying to create memorable scenes like the ones we saw in Jurassic Park or The Lost World. I mean, when the first time I saw Jurassic Park, I was very excited because I loved Steven Spielberg, but I love Michael Crichton. And Michael Crichton, I remember at that time, I love Westworld, I love Runaway, I love Coma, The Great Train Robbery, you know, and Steven and Michael Crichton are very good in creating big fun and entertainment, and at the same time talk about interesting ideas. You know, it's and I like that. When I read the script and Colin told me, I thought about you because of the orphanage, and I want you to do like this kind of haunted house story. I thought, well, this is going to be fun. I read the script, and of course, when you read a script and there's a brachiosaurus that you need to fit into a mansion, there is a certain tone. You know, it's like, okay, this is a fun, right summer blockbuster. But at the same time, there were very interesting things. At the beginning, for example, there is a reference that Malcolm does about nuclear power. And I thought that was very interesting because nuclear power is the first time that man is over nature. It's a pivotal moment in human history because it's the first time that man can kill all life on Earth. And that kind of red line that we cross provokes monster. When you think about the atomic mushroom, that's a monster, you know. And for me, it creates the same impact to see a T-Rex. That's another sign of that's another monster created because we cross red lines. So basically, what we are afraid of the most is ourselves. I thought these ideas were there in the story and were developing into a story that was taking one step further into the Jurassic universe, because it was not about dinosaurs anymore. It was about the whole world, and it was about us.
Well, I mean, and that's something this movie really sets up is, you know, I think people, ever since the San Diego sequence of Lost World, have been kind of yearning to see dinosaurs out and about. And that must have been something exciting for you, too, to know that you were setting up a much bigger, I mean, the franchise can't go back to the park.
The last 5 minutes, but yes.
Well, yes. But I mean, it's still, you know, there's something you got to do. You got to essentially put a period on all the park stuff. Parks isn't there anymore, so you have a real, like, you know, giant impact on where the series is going from here. It's not just like, you know, a middle installment. You know, this is a game changer for this franchise.
Yeah, no, and I really like this idea of creating a second half inside a Gothic mansion. You know, it sounds so much fun that I fell in love immediately.
Well, and before I open it up to audience questions, I also have to thank you for putting Ted Levine in the movie. He's so good as a guy you just hate. Well, and, you know, and he apparently likes taking roles.
He said to me, I'm going to create the most hateable American guy that deserves to be eaten by a dinosaur. And I said, okay, go ahead, I'm fine with it.
And you're like, well, I have a character that like collects body parts. Who am I going to go to? Buffalo Bill. Of course. He doesn't collect your skins, though. All right, so I am going to open it up to the audience now. We have a few issues of the Birth Movies Death magazine that J.A. signed, and I will be giving them out to questions I think that are good. So I want to start. I've heard that there's somebody
one
here
certain
named Gus.
question over here by a huge fan, Gus.
Yeah, all right.
Gus has been pretty excited all night, you guys. Can we give him a big round of applause? He's bringing the heat, you guys. All right, Gus, ready for your question?
So, AJ, what is that name? How did you become a director of major movie such as Jurassic World?
Well, I did 3 movies before this one, and some of those movies were seen by the creators of Jurassic Park. It was Steven and Frank Marshall who saw The Impossible, and they offered me actually the first Jurassic World. But at that time, there was no script, and only 6 months before getting into pre-production, and I thought that I was not that kind of guy of getting into a big Hollywood film with no script, and I passed. I remember I told Steven, listen, there's nothing else in the world that I want more than working with you, but I'm not that kind of guy. And suddenly, when Jurassic World 2, when Jurassic World came out and it became such a big success, they thought about the sequel and they called me, and I was available at that time, so I said yes.
All right, I think you get a magazine. Why don't you come up?
Gus is pretty happy with that.
But basically, I went to film school and I studied a lot. I did all my homework. I watched a lot of movies. Classic movies too, not only movies from now, you know?
He's getting some pictures.
Mom's like, he listened to Mom, and...
That's exactly what he wanted. He wanted to be a director when he wrote that.
Good.
Yeah. So what?
No, he's not listening.
So what do you think at this age is the perfect thing for him to do if he wants to be a director?
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, I don't have a memory of the moment I decided to be a director. I always wanted to be. So there's not an age to.
Just start making movies with the iPhone. Like start learning
course.
visual language.
No, now you can have a camera. You have a camera in your iPhone. When I was a kid, there was no camera, so I had to do it with my hands. Shadow puppeteering with my hands.
So go make movies with your iPhone. Then you can do Jurassic 17.
You have an iPhone.
On the iPhone. All right. We need some hands. Okay, I'm going to start in the back because I always pick the closer end. I see a red shirt right there.
Coming.
So I was wondering, artistically, how different is it directing a movie coming in sort of in the middle of a franchise, like Jurassic World, rather than having your own self-contained stories like you've done in the past with El Orfanato and Monster Calls?
Well, first of all, it's a very different story when you do a personal film than when you get the offer to do a Jurassic movie. It's such a big franchise. Basically what you do is try to bring your knowledge and help the franchise, help the movie, instead of creating an own personal film. By the way, when you start to work in a movie, it doesn't matter how personal it is, it's a lot of work and you always try to make it as good as possible, you know? But in this case it was very interesting because being the second episode in the trilogy, it felt very interesting the way the movie goes somewhere that some other movies maybe doesn't dare to go. I mean, it's basically the story is a big mess. I mean, the characters lose control. We open the gate to a world that we've never seen before, and that was very interesting to me. When you read the books from Michael Crichton, they always try to be like a reflect on the world we live in. He talks about the complex relation that man has towards science and nature and new technologies, and this is a theme that is more relevant than ever nowadays. So it felt like a very interesting way of talking about the chaos and the uncertainty that we live right now.
You want a magazine? It's yours, buddy.
I can do microphone.
I'm pretty much just going to give people magazines if they just ask a real question. So as long as you don't make a statement, you're fine. All right, you're very excited, so I will pick you.
Here.
He stood up.
He did. He went all out. That was a good choice.
I've been trying. So I really liked how you shot the scene when they are sinking in the bubble as a long take because it really made me feel the tension of time running out. So I was wondering if you could speak to how you design sequences, and you said that you draw storyboards yourself, and also kind of how you mentioned coming into direct a fifth film in a series, coming up with something new that we haven't seen before. I mean, there were a lot of callbacks to previous images, like the close-up of the girl's eye, reminding me of the close-up of the T-Rex. And I'll stop talking now so you can answer.
Yeah, you're risking your magazine, buddy.
What was the first question?
You want to simplify it?
Designing sequences?
Oh yeah, the gyrosphere thinking. Yes, as I said before, for me the whole thing starts when I decide the camera position, because when you set up the camera position, you're communicating an emotion. For me, it's impossible to separate the place where I place the camera, and the emotion I want to communicate. So in that scene, it was a moment of anguish. It was a moment of claustrophobia. So I decided to shoot the whole scene in only one shot with the cameraman inside the gyrosphere. It's not a single shot, really. It's 3 takes, and we had to merge the 3 takes in a way that had to be invisible for the audience, and that was pretty tricky because shooting in the water with such a wide lens, it's very difficult to hide the cats. Also felt pretty dangerous from the outside. The actors were inside the gyrosphere. The gyrosphere was really sinking in the water. There was no escape of the actors. Once they were running out of air, it felt very dangerous from the outside.
Wait, so you, James Cameron, abyssed that sequence?
Of course, you have the shadow of James Cameron all the time when you shoot something like that. But I mean, I double checked a couple of times that the actors were safe. Just in case.
As long as you checked a couple of times, I'm sure that's all right, I want to go right here for you. Oh, you can get a magazine. But
Also, I'm coming.
only got 2 left, so better wave your hand.
Where am I going? Okay, hi.
Hey. Hi. It's kind of a 2-part question, but were you inspired to shape the character of like Chris Pratt's character in the film by other actors or characters that you've seen in other films?
Like what?
Okay, so my reason for the question is because I felt like as they're sinking, there's like a very Titanic like hand on the globe shot and like running out of air, and then they end up on the beach and it's like Inception. So it's feeling very like Leonardo DiCaprio, like shaped.
You didn't get lost vibe out of that?
Wow, it's been a long tour and never asked me that before. No one asked me that before. No, I didn't think about that. I mean, I think that it's great that Chris Pratt is a first of all, it's a brilliant actor. And the first time we sat down and talked about Owen, he told me that the character is inspired in someone that he really knows is a friend of him, and he knows exactly. It's a friend of him, so he knows exactly how he is. And it was very interesting the way we talk about the characters because he always had the right answer because it's taken from a real person, you know. And that was very very interesting. And he's an actor that helps you a lot, supports you a lot as on set. I remember that every time we do a scene, we talk about it, and he was kind of like all the time like analyzing the scene, and he was giving me a lot of ideas. I remember like shooting the moment of the truck, and when they are inside the truck with the T-Rex, it was like, I don't know, like one day before, 2 days before, he said, we need to finish this scene with Owen jumping through the mouth of the T-Rex, and I said, yes, it's a great idea, but we're shooting that tomorrow, the day after tomorrow. I mean, and it's such a massive thing when you make those changes, and you try to adapt because it was a good idea. It was a good idea, and at the end it's more work, but it's worth it too when you see the movie. But no, there was no Leonardo DiCaprio inspiration.
Are you sure that his friend isn't Leonardo DiCaprio? Nope. No, so the drink could be alive.
I will ask him.
You can have the magazine if you want. All right. Oh my God, everybody's excited. You're super excited. I'll go to you next. We do only have 1 more magazine, so maybe I'll take the next 2 or 3 questions and we'll vote on like what the best question is. Is that all right.
Well, sorry. Thank you for, first of all, for being here because I'm a huge fan of your work. I've been a fan since The Orphanage. As an HIV positive person, that movie meant a lot to me. And one of the things that I find that's fascinating about your work in general is the thread of humanity that goes throughout all of them, especially Monster Calls. Obviously, that was like a very, very emotional movie. And I want to say that, first of all, this is probably the most emotional Jurassic Park movie since the original for me, which is a huge deal because the original is my favorite movie of all time. So thank you, first of all, for injecting that humanity into this that I really appreciate. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about what sparks you creatively to accept projects, because that is something that I've noticed through the threads of all of your films, is that humanity is there. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the process of selecting films and your process for artistically what you create.
Well, first of all, I think that's the way my process is. Probably other directors will be different, but what I follow is my instinct. So I always, even though Monster Call was based upon a book or The Impossible or a true story, you always find a way of you always find something that tells you should go that way. And sometimes it's not something that you can express with words. It's something that is very emotional, and you know what it is, and as you do the film, you discover it. In this case, I thought it was. There were a couple of very good. There were a couple of very good ideas in the script that I like. First of all, is the fact that we're not in an island anymore. It's a global debate when they talk about dinosaurs, and I remember that talking about Chris. He was the guy who had the idea of finding Owen, trying to build this kind of like cabin in the mountains, which basically is like trying to escape to your own desert island. It's like a way of saying, I don't want to know anything about the world. But bringing the whole dinosaur conflict all over the world, it's kind of referencing the fact that the biggest problems nowadays are global problems. If you talk about global warming, if you talk about nuclear proliferation, if you talk about globalization, I mean, these are things that you cannot escape from. And I thought it was very interesting to have Owen in trying to not to be committed with dinosaurs at the beginning of the story, and making the dinosaur thing a global, making the dinosaur situation a global thing. And at the same time we're doing that, we are creating a sense of empathy towards the dinosaurs. This is why it's so emotional, the ending of the island. And we are creating empathy with a character of a little girl that at the end of the movie we discover that it's the same thing that the dinosaurs. And I thought that was a very interesting idea, because it was a way of putting the audience in a very straightforward way into the problem, into accepting what they don't understand. I remember I told Colin, I really like this idea of talking about accepting what we don't understand. And you think you're talking about dinosaurs, and then suddenly it's the little girl that you have created a sense of empathy is the same thing. So you kind of like that. These are the kind of ideas that I was interested in when I was talking about what the film is about.
That's a pretty good one. All right, try for you.
I'm right behind you. It's real pretty.
Yeah.
I'm not scared.
Sorry. So going into a big franchise movie, I feel like there are probably a ton of things that the audience feels is maybe owed to them, as far as things that the movie has to have and things that it needs to be, but also coming into it, you as a director are bringing your own voice and things that are unique to you. So I was wondering if you could just talk to us about how you sort of feel your voice ended up in the movie, and maybe just if you have a couple of examples of like, this is me in this movie.
Well, Colin already thought about the story that the second half was a haunted house story, and he told me from the very beginning, I thought about you because of the orphanage, and so it felt like there was a lot of space there that I can kind of like flow naturally into the story. I thought it was because I really like suspense, and I really like creating moments of suspense and set pieces. When I think about Jurassic, I think about scenes. I don't think about the movies. I think about the moment of the cliff hanging, of the truck hanging in the cliff in The Lost World. I think that's the best, for me, that's the best scene ever in a Jurassic movie. And then I think about the velociraptors in the kitchen. I think about the first scene with the T-Rex in Jurassic. So my intention was to create memorable set pieces that people will remember. Set pieces that had to be suspenseful and fun. And in that sense, there was a lot of space for that. There was even that scene of the dioramas. The way Colin wrote that scene was a diorama night. Here we will see a Bayona moment. Full stop. And I said, oh, good. So there was a lot of space for me to do that scene, you know. So there was a space in there, and also in the Jurassic movies, that there is at the end of the process there's only one voice, and that's Steven. And Steven was supervising the process. And I was asking for advice all the time. I was like trying to show Steven what were the scenes that I was doing, show him the shots, just for the pleasure of being with Steven, telling him what are the shots we're gonna do, and he was very, very supportive all the time. He understood perfectly, watching the storyboards and the animatics, what I wanted to do, and he was very enthusiastic.
Not bad to have Steven Spielberg on speed dial. That's pretty good. I think I want to call it. I want to give that dude the mag. Is that cool?
Let's give him the mag.
Like the weight of giving the last one out is like crushing me. Okay, so we still have some questions. Yeah. Yep. Oh my goodness, waving arms here.
I came 1,200 miles for this. Seriously, I came from North Carolina.
You deserve a magazine.
You might have some posters or something. I think it might be.
It's okay, I just want to ask you a question.
No, it's not okay. Come on.
Hey, we'll hook him up. We'll hook him up.
Well, we'll take a picture.
That's an idea.
We'll take a picture together.
I'll take that. I'll take that. I have a two-part question for you, sir. First is a comment. The orphanage made me cry. The Impossible made me cry. A Monster Calls makes me cry. And this movie made me cry. So you're really good at making
way, right?
In a good way, in the best way, and you're good at making me cry. But my first question, it seems like all of your movies have to deal with parents connecting with their children. I'm just curious where that sort of stems from. My second question is for Gus, really. What movies have been the most influential for you in your filmmaking process, and that you would recommend that Gus watch?
Wow.
Tell us about your trauma that caused you.
I was trying to be more
that
subtle.
Story that there is a story, I don't know if that's true, that David Leitch went to the psychologist, and he asked the psychologist, okay, if you fix me, if you cure me, I'm gonna keep doing good movies, and he said probably not, and then he left the psychologist. So I don't know really. As I said before, there's something. You know, when you're at film school, normally the teacher tells you every time you're going to shoot something, the question is what is what you want to explain? What is the idea you want to explain? And sometimes it's not an idea. Sometimes it's an emotion, as I said. And as you try to find a story to communicate that emotion, and you really don't know where that emotion is coming from. So I think it's very interesting somehow be able to listen to yourself, to listen to yourself, like that, like trying to go where your instinct is telling you to go. And then when you're doing the films, normally you find out where is that coming from. Most of the times you realize when you are doing interviews and Q&As, it's like, oh, okay, so I did it for that. But what I mean is that you really need to get a direction. You really need to get something that you really want to get, and that's the way I do it normally. And movies, I mean, I've been watching movies since I was a kid, all sorts of different movies, because in Spain when I was a kid there was only one TV station, and they show all sorts of different movies. So when I was a kid, I saw American movies, Japanese movies, European movies. So since being a kid, I discovered Spielberg, Charlie Chaplin, Alfred Hitchcock, Truffaut, Kurosawa, and I felt that for me all those movies talk with the same level of intensity. I'm very lucky I consider that I'm very lucky that I discovered all those directors when I was very young. And every movie is different. Somehow you create that kind of like memory that helps you when you're doing a film. Like, okay, Kurosawa did like that, or that kind of thing. For example, in this movie, when I read the script, there was a moment where you can see the Indoraptor sneaking through the window of Macy. It was a very short moment in the story, but it reminded me one of the scenes that I was shocked when I was a kid. Probably the scene that I was more scared of when I was a kid. I was probably like 5 or 6 years, and accidentally I saw one scene of Dracula from John Badham, where Frank Langella is crawling down. It's super creepy, you should see that movie. Frank Langella is crawling down, he looks at the camera, keeps crawling down, and as a kid I was like, what the fuck?
He saw you.
Actually, there is a moment when Claire is banging, bam, 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 with the gun, there's a moment that the raptor looks at the camera, and I felt a little bit like I was trying to do the same. But I remember being a kid that I saw that moment of Frank Langella crawling down and sneaking through the window of Mina, upside down. I mean, it's such a shocking scene. And as a kid, I couldn't sleep for months. Of course, I was sleeping like looking at the window in my bedroom. I had another window in my toilet, so every time I went to the toilet, I was like this. It's totally true. I was convinced that Frank Langella was going to go through the window. Really, it's true. And reading the script, there was a moment that I told Colin, okay, this is going to be a great moment. This is going to be a great moment because I think I can bring all those fears and the horror of that I felt when I was a kid into that scene. So it's basically you find a way of somehow make the story go through your experience, your emotions, and a very important part of my education are movies. So follow my Twitter, and I will, from time to time I recommend movies, so maybe there you will see what kind of movies you should see.
Awesome, thank you.
We good for a couple more?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. All right, I promised you next. Yeah, that's you.
Where was it?
Oh, you're waiting for me. I thought you got shy all of a sudden.
Yeah.
So you mentioned before that one of the main themes of this movie was man's power over God. What was the most difficult aspect of that?
Power over?
Yeah, like man's like power over, or man manipulating the power of God.
God, no. Nature.
Yeah, nature. Well, I guess what was sorry.
Not the same,
Sorry. What was the most difficult for you to be able to translate that to today's audiences?
Well, first of all, the movie it's a fun movie, so you don't really get. I mean, you shouldn't get obsessed of communicating that idea because at the end, the audience go to see Jurassic movies because they want to see dinosaurs eating people. So, so basically, you focus in creating like great action scenes and memorable death scenes. But at the same time, and this is something that you can find in Michael Crichton, you can find in Spielberg, you know, this whole obsession of talking about interesting things and the world we live in right now. So I thought that those ideas were were expressed in the dialogue that Jeff Goldblum has at the beginning. You know, this idea of trying to escape from the world, but nowadays we live in a world that you cannot escape from the biggest problems, you know, and that's what basically Owen is trying to do, and Claire is there to somehow convince Owen that he needs to commit, he needs to take a decision, he needs to do something about it, you know. And it's a planting for the third movie, you know, because the whole movie works like a second act, you know. The characters somehow lose control at the end of the story, and you set up what will be the next episode, you know. But in general, I think it's a way of finding something interesting to talk about as you do a movie that basically it's a fun ride for the summer.
I've ignored the back for a while, so I'm going to go over there.
Well, it's a little bit of a running.
Yeah, sorry.
No, I'm just kidding. You want to end on Gus? Or we got one over here. Okay, then we'll. He's got a Jurassic Park shirt on. It's deserved.
Thank you. So when you have a competent franchise like Jurassic Park, and like you said, people are wanting to see certain things, but you're confident enough to know there's some things they don't know they want to see because I haven't shown them to yet. You have your own voice. Were there any parts of making this movie where you felt, oh, I have a really great idea, but maybe not for Jurassic World, maybe it doesn't fall in the perimeters of what people are expecting or going to see, or maybe even something that you asked to do, and like you said, maybe one time you went to Steven and he said no.
No, not really. I mean, we had a script, we had a draft, we had a script from Colin. So basically, the ideas were there, and what I was trying to do is try to bring the story to the screen in the most effective way possible. So I was trying to figure out what was the story about and express in a more successful way. I mean, for example, one of the ideas that I suggest Colin is that to do an auction. There was no auction in the script. It was just a sale. And I told Colin, listen, this movie is about greed, so we should do it. We should do it. An auction. We should put all these people bidding for animals, because that's a very powerful image. And from the moment I said that, Colin understood the idea perfectly, and Stephen loved it. So that's the kind of work that I did with Colin. There was a script, and I was trying to make his ideas the most effective possible in the final result.
Well, are we going to bookend it with Gus here? Does that sound fair?
I think so.
All right.
We'll
Hope you have a good
bookend
one,
it.
Gus.
Gus,
Get
you got a
your
good one?
questions.
Well, back to the Dracula thing. It's just a little thing. So something tells you that with Dracula haunting you, so something tells you that you had a loaded pistol in your closet with a silver bullet.
He said you probably had a gun with a silver bullet in your closet. That's more werewolves,
that's
but
werewolves.
silver does kill vampires. People forget that.
My question is.
Okay.
So how did, since you're the director, you would know about this, but how do you feel about using the animatronic dinosaurs for this movie?
That's a good one.
Very good. I mean, from the very first moment, because I was coming from a movie called Monster Calls, and we had a giant tree monster there that was recreated with CGI and animatronics. And I learned a lesson there. So the first thing I told the visual effects supervisors watching the old Jurassic World is that I wanted to improve the interaction, especially those moments when the actors are touching the dinosaurs. So for example, they were using these kind of like gray sculptures. They use them as a reference. So when the actors were touching the dinosaur, they were touching this kind of gray thing. And the first thing I told them is that we need to paint them with the real texture, so we can rescue the textures and the light that affects this kind of reference. When bounces in the sculpture, it affects differently the skin of the actor. So those kind of small details, because I really like the work that they did in the first Jurassic World, but I felt that there were things that could have been done better, and this was especially with the interaction, and also the fact that we had so many scenes with dinosaurs sleeping or tranquilized help us a lot in doing scenes with animatronics. Animatronics are very helpful for the actors because they can perform in front of something real, they can touch it, and at the same time are very helpful for the CGI guys because they have an excellent reference of light, of color, of texture, and even sometimes they can get the footage of that animatronic and project the same texture or skin or light into the CGI model. So animatronics are always a great help. Always the success comes from merging both technologies. So you have a scene where you have animatronics and you have CGI, you try to blend it in a way that you cheat the audience. And there is a scene that I really like a lot, how it plays with animatronics and CGI, which is that moment when they perform a surgery on Blue. And doing the visual effects reviews of that scene, I remember that there were shots that we had an amazing animatronic with 11 puppeteers moving the Velociraptor. There were shots that, for example, I asked them to replace the head for a CGI head, so we can get movements that the animatronic was not able to do. And in the next shot, which basically was exactly the same shot, we were replacing only the hands. So we were like switching in a way that even myself, when I was doing the visual effects reviews, I had to ask the people from ILM what was digital and what was animatronic, and that's the final goal as a director, to get to a point that you cannot, you really don't know what you're watching.
I was lucky enough to visit you guys in Hawaii when you were shooting, and I got to pet Blue, and I can tell you, I think there was only 3 or 4 puppeteers but like she came to life. She was there, so I can only imagine as an actor having that be,
No, and the actors are super excited to be in front of a dinosaur. Suddenly there's an extra that you can capture with camera.
They do love tennis balls too.